Okay, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me once again back to speak on this day. You know, there was a minhag in a lot of the Ashkenazic countries that when it came these days, I mean the 25th of December, so it was a time people didn't come to the Beis HaMedrash. They called it nitl. They didn't come to the Beis HaMedrash to learn. And the question is why it was like that. And one of the reasons was because it was dangerous to go out in the streets. So they used to sit home and they used to learn. So Baruch Hashem that we're able to use the opportunity to be able to learn. We don't have to be afraid of walking out into the streets. So we could use the opportunity to come to learn. And if anything, maybe we have to be thankful that now that all the businesses are closed down, everybody is on vacation. So, by the way, traveling, I got here 10 minutes quicker than I usually get here because there's no traffic. I guess everybody is, the typical person in the city is fast asleep or whatever. But so, Baruch Hashem, we're able to get together to learn Torah. I'd like to begin with some words in the Rambam in the end of Hilchos Chanukah. The Rambam is in Perek Dalid, Halacha Yud Beis. The Rambam says, "Mitzvahs ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od." The mitzvah of ner Chanukah is a very, very beloved mitzvah, and we know that the Rambam was very, very particular in the words that he used. Not too much, not too little, not too much. Particular in every single word that he used. And when it comes to talking about the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, so he says that it's a very, very beloved mitzvah. And then he goes on to explain why is he saying this. A person has to be very, very careful when it comes to the mitzvah of Chanukah in order that he should express, he should show the ness of Ner Chanukah. And because of this chavivus of mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, because it's such a beloved mitzvah, so the Rambam says that it has to do with a halacha. He says even if a person doesn't have anything, he doesn't have his own food, and in order for him to get food, he has to take money from tzedakah. You should go, you should sell your jacket, you should sell your shoes, in order that you should be able to have money to be able to buy shemen and neiros in order to light the neiros of Chanukah. And we know that this halacha it doesn't apply to every other mitzvah. When it comes to the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, Ner Chanukah is the mitzvah of the Rabbanan, not the mitzvah of the Yeraisa. So the Rambam tells us that because of the chavivus of the mitzvah, it's such a beloved mitzvah, so you have to sell everything you have, but you have to make sure that you're behind the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. And there are those who say that this Rambam is even referring to the Hiddur mitzvah. We know that in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah, in order to fulfill the mitzvah, if you light one candle, it's also good enough. But the best way to do it, the proper way to do it, is to light the first night 1, second night 2, all the way up till we get to 8. So those who say that this halacha applies even for a person to spend the amount of money that he needs in order to have the 8 candles, that's how much out of the way you have to go. So we really need 2 things to explain. First of all, why it is that Ner Chanukah is so special. What makes Ner Chanukah, the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, so special that a person has to go out of his way more than he would go for just about every other mitzvah. And the second thing that we need to explain is the lashon of the Rambam, chaviva hi ad ma'od. Chaviv, beloved. The Rambam would say that it's a mitzvah that's choshuv, it's important. So that would be one kind of an expression. But that's not the language that the Rambam uses. He says it's a beloved mitzvah. the emphasis is not on the importance of the mitzvah, but on the fact that the mitzvah is beloved to us. And we need to focus on this. If the Rambam went out of his way to use this language, which he normally doesn't use, so what message is the Rambam coming here to tell us? What lesson are we supposed to gain from it? What insight should we have b'negea to the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah? So I would like to begin a little bit of the background of the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. We know that we Jews, Nebuch, we go from one gullus to another gullus. Gullus, we translate into English exile. Exile means that we wander in strange countries. Gullus Mitzrayim, we had to live amongst the Egyptians, and then we were zeicher to be able to build the Beis HaMikdash, come into Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is our place. Build the Beis HaMikdash, but because of the aveiros that we did, we had to go into exile again. We went into Bavel. Bavel, once again, it's not our place, not our country. It's Golis, and it's called Golis Bavel. The Golis that we're in today, so this is called Golis Edom. But again, for 2,000 years, Kamat for 2,000 years, we're in a strange country. We can't be in Eretz Yisrael. We have to live between the Goy. And once again, we understand the language of Golis that we're using, exile. We're in a strange country. But I left out one of the terms of Golis, one of the places of Golis that the words of Chazal talk about. And that is Golis Yavon. We were in Golis by the Greeks. Golis Yavon. And that's where the story of Chanukah takes place. Now, it's interesting about the term Golis Yavon is, like we mentioned, Golis always refers, if you translate into English, going to exile. Golis Yavon took place in Eretz Yisrael. The story we had with the Greeks, the problems that we had with the Greeks that led up to the story of Hanukkah, we weren't driven out into a strange land. We were in our country. We were in our land. They came into our country. So why is the lashon of Golis used? And we know from the words of Chazal that when we talk about Golis Yavon, so there's drushes of Chazal using different terms to describe the different types of Golis that we go through. And when our Chachamim describe the Golis of Yavon, so they use the word Cheshech, darkness. Cheshech al Pnei Sahain. When there was darkness on the world, there was darkness that came to the Jewish people. So that's Golis Yavon. We're in Eretz Yisrael, but we don't even feel or realize, sense, appreciate the fact that we're in Mokum Kodesh, Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. We're going around in Cheshech. We're going around in darkness. That's the way Chazal describe Golis Yavon. So I'd like to elaborate a little bit as far as this point is concerned. The Abarbanel, and we all know, I'm sure, who the Abarbanel was. The Abarbanel was one of our major Chachamim who lived in the time of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. So we're talking about over 500 years ago. And he has a Pirush on Chumash, lengthy Pirush on Chumash, where he explains many, many difficult things. So he says that coming to build the second Beis HaMikdash is not the same like when we went to build the first Beis HaMikdash. When we went to build the first Beis HaMikdash, we went there with the idea of being there forever, so to say. This is it. This is our place. We went through the Golus of Mitzrayim. We went through the Midbar, Moshe Rabbeinu. We come into Eretz Yisrael. We conquer Eretz Yisrael. And basically, we set up, through David HaMelech, we set up a Beis HaMikdash in Eretz Yisrael. This is our place. And we plan on being here forever. Mashiach is going to come. Why is it that eventually we had to leave Eretz Yisrael? Because of our chatoim, because of our aveiros, Rachmana litzlan. So because of that, eventually the Goyim came and they drove us out of Eretz Yisrael. We had to go into Golus. We went to Babel. We went to Iraq. We went to Iran. And the reason was, once again, that we had to leave Eretz Yisrael was because of our chatoim. The Barbanel says that when we came into Eretz Yisrael after Babel, after Golus Babel, in other words, once again, we were in Eretz Yisrael. We were driven out to Babel, to Iraq, and then eventually, through the leadership of Ezra HaSefer, we came back into Eretz Yisrael to build the second Beis HaMikdash. So the Barbanel says that you have to know that we always knew all along that this is not going to last. Our coming to build the second Beis HaMikdash is a lot different than when we built the first Beis HaMikdash. When we built the first Beis HaMikdash, this was our place. We're here to stay. And if we would have been Zeicha, if we would have done what was right, we could still be there till today. But the building of the second Beis HaMikdash was much different. We knew all along that this is not a permanent place for us, and that ultimately we're going to have to go, we're going to have to leave Eretz Yisrael and go back into Golus. Why then were we taken back? Why did Ezra, Nehemiah, and all the other Chachamim, why did they bring us back into Eretz Yisrael? So he says that the reason they brought us back into Eretz Yisrael was because we had to make preparations for the great Golus that we have to go through, that we're into even today, Golus Edom. That the Jewish people should be able to survive. And when we talk about survival, we're talking about survival beruchnius, spiritually, to be able to survive 2,000 years in Golus. And I kind of hate to do this, but if we pull ourselves back, not look at it sort of from the personal angle, but look at it from a historical, like as a historian looks at this. A nation of people that go from country to country, and through it all, they maintain their beliefs, they maintain their basic ideals and culture and Torah, and this goes on for 2,000 years. 2,000 years is longer than a day before yesterday. There's no such example of this in any other nation of the world. How are we going to survive for 2,000 years? So there was the group of Chachamim called the Anshe Knesset Agdeilah, led by Ezra HaSefer, who brought all the Jews back into Eretz Yisrael. And the purpose being that we have a couple of 100 years that we'll be able to be here. And those few 100 years that we're here, we have to prepare for this bitter and dark Golus of 2,000 years that's facing us. We have to do what we need to do to see to it that the Jewish people should be able to survive. And of course, we're talking about spiritually survive, to be able to survive for those 2,000 years. And the truth is, as the Abarbanel points out, it's kind of elementary for anybody who looks at the period of time of the second Beis HaMikdash, the period of time that the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, the miracle of Ner Chanukah took place. Everybody could see that this is not our position then in Eretz Yisrael, was much, much different than what was like in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash. Because from almost the moment we came into Eretz Yisrael, we were under the auspices, we were under the jurisdiction of the nations of the world. We were never on our own. We were always subjected to the will and the whim of the nations of the world that were all around us. Just to begin from the beginning, so to say. The first Kohen Gadol in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash was the Gemara called Shimon HaTzadik. His name was Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik, he was the first Kohen Gadol in Eretz Yisrael in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara tells over the story about how Shimon HaTzadik heard that the great conqueror of the world, Alexander the Great, on his march to conquer the world, is coming to Eretz Yisrael. So Shimon HaTzadik comes out to meet Alexander the Great. And the Gemara describes the whole story of his meeting Alexander the Great. Perhaps we're all familiar with the fact that who was Alexander the Great's teacher, who was his mentor? Aristotle. This we know from the secular books, many different books, and we see it also, the Gemara hints to this fact. Aristotle, the greatest of all of the Chachamim, of the wise men, of the Greek philosophers, the Greek scientists that were found in the world, he was the one that was Alexander the Great's mentor. And he comes with Alexander into Eretz Yisrael and meets up with Shimon HaTzadik. From that point on, the Greeks were in control of Eretz Yisrael. We had to pay taxes to the Greeks. There were many different xeris laws that were made by the Greeks that we had to abide with. So it wasn't our country. It wasn't like we could do with this country as we wished. If anything, we were under, once again, we were under the will and the wish of the Greeks who were on this march to capture the world. And that went on for a couple of 100 years until the Greeks, the whole Greek culture called the Greek Empire, was destroyed and was taken over by the Romans. And when the Romans took over, became the central power, the main power in the world, so included in their empire was Eretz Yisrael, Nebuch. So they came into Eretz Yisrael and took over from the Greeks this power that the Greeks had in Eretz Yisrael, the control that the Greeks had in Eretz Yisrael. Now the Romans took it over. So basically, from the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash till the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, we were either in the hands of the Greeks, and from there we went into the hands of the Romans. So, of course, we understand that the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, it's never like we were there as free people, that we could do whatever we felt like doing, like it was in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash. Not at all. We were always under the control of the different nations of the world. Once again, so why were we sent there? Why did we go back to Eretz Yisrael? Because we have to prepare for the terrible golus that we're in right now. In the Sefer Emes Yaakov, from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, so he elaborates on this concept that the Abarbanel says. And he goes to explain. For instance, we have many different rabbinical laws that we follow that were instituted in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Some of them in the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash, some of them during the second Beis Hamikdash, but many of the different laws that we have till today, so they were instituted at that time. And why were they instituted? They were instituted, once again, because these Chachamim realized that these laws are important, that we should be able to survive in this golus. Just give a couple of examples. There's halacha of pasaku. You're not allowed to eat bread that's baked by a goy, by a Gentile. And there are many different variations in this halacha. We're not here to paskin or shaila, but we need to know. It's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch. Pasakum. There's a halacha of bishulach. You're not allowed to eat food that was cooked by a goy. Why were these halachas initiated? Because we need to live between the goyim for 2,000 years. No matter what country we're going to go to, we're going to have to live amongst the goyim. And the Chazal wanted to be certain that we shouldn't mix with them too much. We should be able to separate ourselves from them. And they understood that the way a person develops, so to say, a friendship, a closeness with other people, is when they sit down together at the table for a meal. So we can't do that. We don't sit down at a table together with them for a meal because Chazal wanted we shouldn't have that element of closeness. There are halachas v'negeya to immorality, the aroyas that are asur, and Chazal instituted halachas in immorality that we have to follow to today also. There are halachas that have to do with Shmira Shabbos. For instance, the halacha of muksa, that certain things are muksa. All that was instituted in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Before the second Beis Hamikdash, there was no such halacha that you couldn't touch or move something that was muksa. Uvda dechayel, different things that you can't do because these are the type of things that a person would normally do when he was running his business or working in a difficult type of a work that Chazal didn't want us to do on Shabbos. Shabbos, a person has to feel Kedusha Shabbos. It's important. It's important. It's very important that when it comes Shabbos, a person who throughout the week is out there making a living amongst the goyim, doing what he has to do in order to be able to survive. But one day a week, we have to pull ourselves back, come together, be mechazik, strengthen each other, in order, once again, that we should be able to survive this long trek that we have in Golus. So we have a whole list of such laws that were instituted in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Let's give another example. In the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, there was no such thing as a yeshiva like we have today. No such thing as a kollel like we have today. How did a person learn Torah? His father taught him Torah. And the truth is, that's the best way and the most proper way to learn Torah. Because the one who could best communicate with this student, this young student, is the father. Because they are related, so to say, and they know each other best. And the father has the responsibility to give over to his son the words of Torah. And the Gemara tells us that ultimately the Chachamim realized that this is not going to work because there are many, many fathers that Nebuch have to put in a full day's work. There were many different fathers that weren't on that level that they're able to teach their children Torah because of all the difficulties that came about in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. So what they did was they set up a huge yeshiva in Yerushalayim, so that the students came from all over Eretz Yisrael. They came to Yerushalayim because Yerushalayim is the best place to learn Torah, as it says in the pasuk, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. And then they saw that also wasn't something that could survive, that could last. Because there were people all over Eretz Yisrael, because of the difficulties that were going on in Eretz Yisrael, that weren't able to send their children to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara tells us over about a Tana, Rabbi Shiur ben Prachya, who he instituted a new idea of setting up yeshivas in every city. B'chol prach u'prach, there should be yeshivas. And in the city themselves, there should be, in different neighborhoods, there should be yeshivas. So let's follow what this means. It means, in other words, this is not the best way of doing it. The best way is the father should teach his son, but were falling down in our level, that we aren't able to keep that up. We should learn Torah in Yerushalayim, surrounded by Kedushas Yerushalayim. But Nebuch, we weren't able to do that anymore either. So we have to institute that there should be yeshivas in every neighborhood, that every student should be able to go to learn in that neighborhood. It's the beginning of the yeshiva movement, started in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. And let's move on. They also instituted the idea, the siddur that we have. And it's something that is phenomenal. We all daven from the same siddur. If we talk about the Shemona Esrei, I think the last time I was here, we were talking about why there's some words that your nusach is a little bit different than our nusach. A word here, a word there, when it changed and how it changed. But basically, we're all davening 18 brachas in Shemona Esrei, plus one more bracha that was instituted afterwards. We all have the same siddur. When did they institute having this siddur? That was instituted at the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. What was before that? Before that, every person walked into the Beis HaKnesses and expressed himself the way that from his heart, begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu what he wanted. But the Chazal saw that people were falling down in their level of ruchnius, their level of understanding. So they made a nusach, they made a language which would be appropriate for every one of us. Once again, that was instituted in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, the siddur that we have. And if we move on from over there, they did something which is phenomenal. They made it so that Torah Sheba'al Peh could be written down, meaning that until that point, until the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, there was no such thing as a Mishnayos, a Gemara, definitely no such thing as a Rambam, a Rashba, a Ramban, Rishonim, Achronim. Not only didn't we have it, but you weren't allowed to have it, because Torah Sheba'al Peh, you're not allowed to write down. The only thing that was there, Biksav, the only thing that we had that was written down was Torah Shebiksav. Chamisha Chumshei Torah, Bereishis, Shemais, Vayikra, Midbar, and Devarim, the Sifrei Nevi'im, Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim, and then you have the books of Ksuvim. Those are the Nevi'im, those are the only books that were allowed to be written down. Mishnayos and Gemara were not allowed to be written down because that's Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the Chachamim, living in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, they realized that what's going to be, the Jews are going to be spread throughout the world. And the Messiah, the tradition that's given over from one generation to another generation, that was given over Ba'al Peh, by word of mouth, from one to the other, is going to get lost, Chas v'sholom. V'lo ya'id, even if it's going to be kept up by those who are able to dedicate themselves for learning 24 hours a day, but Torah is something that has to be learned by everybody. Even a person who has to learn he has to work his 8 hours a day. Even a person who doesn't have the capacity to be able to immerse himself totally into Torah. Even to the person who perhaps is not the genius, doesn't have the mind to be able to keep in his mind, to be able to grasp all of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And if you want to have an idea of what's Torah Sheba'al Peh, so you take a look at the Gemara, so all the Sfarim that you have all around you here in the Beis Medrash. And these Sfarim are not nearly all of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the Jewish mind has to be able to grasp and to retain all of this knowledge. And they saw that the Jewish mind, because of the fact that so much that we were going through, the difficulties that we were going through, so they realized that this is not going to be able to continue. So they said, being that the situation is such, the Lashon of the Gemara is Eis Laseis Lashem Heferu Torah Secha. They realized that we have to do something which is not the best, like we say, it's not the ideal way of doing it, but it must be done. We have to prepare ourselves for this difficult golus that's coming up. And so therefore they were matter to write down Torah Shebal Peh also. And that's the Torah that we have until today. And let's just put in one more understanding in this. Why is it so important that we be able to, that each and every one of us has to be able to retain and have a knowledge in Torah Shebal Peh? Well, first of all, there's the practical application. We need to know Hilchos Shabbos, Hilchos Tefillin, the halachas of kashrus, all of the halachas of Choshen Mishpat, money matters, issues, all that it says in Shulchan Aruch. We got to know it. But there's something else that's even deeper than that. And that's something we have to be able to tap into. When we talked about before, about the fact how extraordinary it is that for 2,000 years we're able to survive in Golus, and we'll be able to, amongst, and I must emphasize this, marching from country to country. And in every country that we go into, each country brings its own challenge, because we have to face up to the culture of that country. And each country has its own challenge, challenging us. And in every single one of these difficult and different kinds of challenges that we're facing up to, we have to be able to stand strong and remain with our ruchnius, with our spirituality. How is this going to be? So the Chacham understood something that is totally elementary to every one of us. There is the power that's found in Torah. A person sits and he learns. What does he learn? Well, he could learn the words of Musar. He could learn Jewish philosophy, so to say. But besides that, he learns B'Metzia, Shnayim Eichzim B'Talis. Two people holding on to a talis. Who gets it? Me or you? We're arguing over something. A money matter that we're busy battling over. And there's an issue, who should get it? There's an issue, b'negeya to Hilchos Shabbos. Is this mutter? Is this asa? Issues b'negeya to thousands and millions of different issues that it's negeya, which when we look at it, we think to ourselves, these issues have nothing to do with Yireh Shamayim. These are technical issues, technical questions in halacha of how we're supposed to do things. And our Chachamim tell us that we're not grasping the truth of Chachmas HaTorah, the wisdom of Torah, because we also have to grasp within Chachmas HaTorah, Kedushas HaTorah, the holiness that there is in Torah, that when we sit down and we learn the words of the Gemara, of the Mishnayos, of the Rambam, of anything, Divrei Torah, when we sit down to learn, that gives us Kedusha, holiness within each and every one of our neshama, makes it possible for us to be able to survive. Otherwise we can't survive. So once again, of course, we needed to know what the laws are. Very important. Very, very important. But besides that, in order for us to be able to survive the challenges that are going to be all around us in the next 2,000 years, we have that battery. How are we going to be able to recharge that battery? How are we going to be able to keep that energy going? To what should we plug ourselves into, so to say, to charge up that battery, which is our neshama? That's Divrei Torah. Learning Divrei Torah. And so the Chacham said that we have to be matter the words of the Torah Shebal Peh. We have to make it so that it's possible for every one of us to learn Torah Shebal Peh, and in order that we should be able to, every one of us should be able to learn Kedei, we should be able to survive once again the terrible gullus that we're facing. And let's go back again to what exactly is Chochmas Yavam? When we talk about the Ness of Chanukah, and we talk about what the Greeks wanted to accomplish. And when we talk about, often we say that the Greeks were against the learning of Torah. The Greeks were the ones that were there to, like we say in our tefillah, lahashkicham Torah secha. We say it in the davening. I see that in your nusach you have exactly the same nusach. We say Kisha'amda Malchus Yavan Harisha Al Amcha Yisrael Lahashkicham Torah Secha Lahavira Michukei V'Tzeinecha, to make us forget the Torah. And sometimes we make a mistake and we think that what this means is that we should forget the laws of the Torah. So I'd like to point out something. We know that the Greeks, after the Beis Hamikdash was up for about 100 years, the king of that area that the Greeks were in charge of, in Alexandria, he sent a letter to the Melech in Eretz Yisrael and asked him to send 70 Chachamim to Alexandria. And the reason he did this was he wanted them to translate the Torah into Greek. Imagine that we're all very aware of this. He called them all together. The Gemara describes what happened. He took all 70 Chachamim and he put each one into a different room because he was suspicious that maybe we wouldn't translate the Torah the proper way. We would try to forge the translation of the Torah because maybe there's something in the Torah that they wouldn't be happy with. So he didn't tell them what he wanted from them. He invited them to Alexandria. They came. He took each one, put him into a separate room, and he told them, you don't leave this room until you translate the Torah into Greek. Why did he do this? Because the king of Yavan at that time, the center of the knowledge, the Greek knowledge, he heard that in Eretz Yisrael there were tremendous chachamim, wise men that were living in Eretz Yisrael. He had the greatest library in the world, full of divrei chachma, and he wanted to incorporate the words of Jewish chachma into that library. He wanted the Torah to be part of that library. So he wanted they should translate the Torah into Greek in order to incorporate Chachmas HaTorah, the wisdom of Torah, into his library and take a place together with every other Chachma that was found in the world. That's why he brought him there. And the Gemara describes exactly what happened. We won't go into it right now. This translation, by the way, still exists till today. We have to understand, like everything else in the non-Jewish world, there are endless variations of this translation of the Torah that the Greeks translated into Greek. And depending under which religion the translation landed up, whether it was the Christians or the Muslims, so it sort of changed. The language of this translation changed. But again, that's not a subject for now. Very different than our Torah, that every single word in our Torah, although we have been separated into different countries for over 2,000 years, but every single word is exactly the same. There's no difference. So to say that the Greeks were interested, lahashkicham Torah secha, to wipe out the Torah, is not true. If we translate lahashkicham Torah secha, that they wanted to wipe out the knowledge of Torah, it's not true. The Greeks went out of their way to translate it into Greek. They wanted to know what's the Torah all about. The answer is, lahashkicham Torah secha is, in order to make it so that the kedushas HaTorah, the effect that Torah has on the Jewish neshama, on the Jewish mind, that they wanted to wipe out. And they translated the Torah into Greek And this is what they did. They said, you Jews, you have Chachma, you have knowledge, we have Chachma. You have Chachma Satira, so we have chemistry, biology, philosophy, so we will put you into the bookshelves together with all the other Chachmas. What difference is there between your Chachma and our Chachma? And we, of course, understood. You want to know the difference? Our Chachma comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our Chachma is Malay Kedusha. Our Chachma has an effect on the mind and the heart of every single individual who learns the Torah and makes it so that this person is a different type of a person. You can't be a Talmud Chacham. You can't be successful at learning Torah if you don't allow the Torah to affect your personality, your character, your Yirah Shamayim. And let's use this as a practical way. Let's start to see what's going on in the world. You know, there used to be a time when, I guess when they developed, two nations came to do battle with each other. So they picked up a knife and they went, stab each other. Rahman al-Islam. And then somebody came up with the idea that we should have a bow and arrow so you could shoot from a distance. And somebody came up with an idea, an invention. You could shoot with a gun. Oy vey. It's getting terrible. And then somebody came up with the idea that there's such a thing as a bomb. Oy vey, oy vey, oy vey. And today, we have to be afraid that you can have a terrorist and he could, Ahmad al-Islam, we didn't even talk about it. So because of the advancement of physics that there is in the world, so the world is in the biggest sakana that it ever was since the creation of the world. I guess Nebuch, we can't check it out with our great-grandfathers. But if we would have had the opportunity, we would have found out that when they sat down to eat breakfast, they didn't have a choice of Cheerios with honey, Cheerios, honey, Cheerios, and this kind of thing, and that kind of a thing. There's 50 different choices of what to eat. Breakfast, lunch, supper, not to go to sleep until you... No, they just didn't have it. And I'm sure everybody... And they didn't miss it because they didn't have it. They didn't know anything about it. So now that we're much more advanced, so what advancement has created into the world, you know, it's like funny. You walk into the supermarket, you have a whole row of water. Water, you know? There's such a thing as... I got some master with water. You know, this, that, even when I was a kid, there was no such thing. There was water, you know. But what has that, let's be honest, what has that done for us? The fact that you can have chachamim, and I'm not taking away from the fact that they're chachamim, wise men, by the Umay Sa'ilam, by the Gentiles. The fact that they are wise and they're able to do such phenomenal things, great things. So they come out on the stage and they boast with the tremendous gaiva of all that they've done. And I guess everybody would stop and say, they deserve it. They deserve it. Look what they've accomplished for society. Look out the window. You see the tall buildings that we have. You can't build such a tall building. You can't fly an airplane in the air. It's impossible. How could a metal thing that weighs tons fly in the middle of the air? You can't do that. You can't. That doesn't work. And you get to the moon. Come on. No such thing. And science and technology today, because of the wondrous minds of our scientists, have made it so that we could do things now that we were never able to do before. But Rabbi said, let's stop to think. Is the world a better place than it was before? Yes, we can fulfill our taivas, our ritzainus. We could do a lot more. We can have a lot more. But are we better people because of it? Is each and every one of us, what they've done, what the scientists have done for society, has it made us into better people? They weren't out to make us into better people. That's not their job. It's not what they're all about. They never claimed to make us into better people. They're there